I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, your home for deer hunting news, stories, and strategies. And now, your host, Mark Kenyon.
Welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast. I'm your host, Mark Kenyon, and this is episode number 56. Today in the show, we're discussing quality deer management co-ops, and we're joined by an expert on this topic, Anna Mitterling. All right, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, brought to you by the good people at Sitka Gear. Now today, as I mentioned a few seconds ago, we're going to be discussing quality deer management co-ops, what they are and how they work. And joining us is a co-op specialist of sorts from Michigan, actually, Anna Mitterling. But before we get Anna on the phone, Dan, my trusty co-host, we've got some catching up to do.
Yes, we do. And before we get into that real quick, now that we have like a sponsor for the show, Sitka Gear, I think it's almost, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like the people need more flair. Do you like have any explosions or anything or that you could add or maybe like lightning striking or thunder or
some sound effects to
some sound effects? I mean, because I've heard some other podcasts and they got some those kind of things, or are we not those kind of people?
The professional ones out there, they probably have like a soundboard where they input, really professional sound effects and stuff. But if you want sound effects, I think probably the best way to do it is to have you literally be our sound effect man. So you have to, that's your job. The rest of the podcast, the rest of the year, I'm going to say, Dan, is whenever you feel fit, whenever you see fit, I want you making DIY sound effects.
Okay.
All right.
I'm just going to give you an example right now.
Yeah.
So it's going to be like, all right, welcome to the Wired to Hunt podcast, brought to you by the good people at Sitka Gear, where our gear is sick-erific.
Well, I'm speechless, as I often am with you, Dan.
I'll take that as a no. I'll take that as a no.
I like your creativity.
I'm spitballing. I'm brainstorming a lot.
You're spitballing. That's your specialty. So, other than brainstorming, I don't know where you come up with this stuff.
I think my brain has problems.
Yeah. Well, hey, you got a couple kids. I can see you've got all sorts of crazy things going on. So, what's new with you other than your brainstorming?
I tell you what, I don't know about you, but I'm starting to see pictures online of bucks and velvet. Mm-hmm. And this weekend I just got all my a majority of my trail cameras and my mineral stations out, so they're soaking right now. And in next month, when I go and finally go get a chance to go check them, that velvet rut train is starting to slowly get into gear, and then today it just got me flipping through old trail camera pictures of previous years, and I'm just like starting to drool.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm right there with you. I don't know what it is, but for me, it's like I kind of, we're always thinking about whitetails. We talk about this stuff all the time, but I kind of go in a very slight lull in the, late winter, early spring. But right about this time, like May, when it starts feeling like summer's arriving again, I all of a sudden get those juices flowing again at an even higher rate. And so the last few days I've been reading through all my old North American whitetails, and I've been watching some deer hunting DVDs at night, and I'm really getting the itch. Just like you said too, pretty soon here the antlers are going to be showing up, and I've been seeing some people posting pictures of bucks with pretty decent growth so far.
Good bases.
Yep, good bases. I saw a picture, a nice one, out past his ears already. With
What?
out past his ears, and nice brow tines coming up. He looked like he was gonna be a stud. And I was out turkey hunting with a friend this weekend, and I didn't see the deer, but he did. He saw a buck that same thing. He said it was pretty close to his ears. It looked like a nice 3 or 4 year old. So
Awesome.
yeah, it's happening. It's happening.
I don't know. And then there's nothing better than, so I'm going to have my trail cameras out for a month, right? And I'm going to get like thousands of pictures on them. So you're just sitting there and it just kind of becomes monotonous, and all of a sudden it's boom, big mature buck. And then you're just like, woohoo. and, and it's just like that fire starts to build. And I'll be honest, I've already lost sleep thinking about like micromanaging my tree stand setups for this upcoming season. It's so stupid.
And it's only gonna get worse.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I can't wait. So you said you got all your cameras up last weekend?
Majority of them. I'm kind of waiting to hear back from a farmer closer to where I actually live, to see if I'm going to have access to 93 acres this year.
Nice.
And it's just something to do so I can hunt closer to home and not have to drive down to my main farm every weekend. Maybe just like when that lull hits, instead of going down there and wasting a weekend, I can hunt up here.
Yeah.
Who knows? There's also been rumors of a 230 incher in the area. So there's there's genetics around here too.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to go wrong in Iowa.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I'm psyched. I don't know if we talked about it. Did I talk about my trip down to Ohio on the podcast yet? A couple weeks ago?
For mineral, or did you do some turkey hunting?
Both.
Both? Okay.
Did we talk about
Explain
that?
away.
Yeah.
No, I don't know.
2 or 3 weeks ago, me and my buddy Josh went down to our Ohio property and did some turkey hunting. I got a bird that first morning, and we would have had a double. I called that was actually 3 toms that came in, and I don't know, my buddy Josh just decided he wanted to let one live another day, so it didn't quite work out. But got a bird down, and then after that we hung 2 cameras and put out some mineral, and we're excited to see who's going to be showing up this year. There's high hopes for the buck I call Glenn. You've heard about him.
Yep.
This will be our 3rd year hunting him, and as of January 2nd of this year, he was alive and kicking, and I got some video of him. So hopefully he should be still around, and he'll just be a unbelievable deer. He'll be a 5.5-year-old. He was pushing 170 last year, so he could be, who knows what he'll be. He's just massive, massive typical.
Yeah.
So, he could be in the 70s again. He could be in the 80s. Who knows? But either way, he'll just be an amazing, mature, beautiful deer that I've got a lot of history with, and I missed him 2 years ago as a 3-year-old. So
That farm is awesome.
yeah, it's a great spot. So excited about him. And there's 2 other booners that were around the end of last year that we know were alive in the late season, so they could be around. Bunch of different bucks that were 3-year-olds last year that we think made it, so they'll be 4-year-olds this year. So I'm stoked. My issue though is that I put those cameras up at the beginning of May. We went down there for that trip, but I'm not going to be able to get back to that property until August. So I have to wait, 3 months. I think right, early May to June to July to August. Yeah, over 3 months I have to wait until I can check those pictures, and that's going to kill me.
Why don't you have your buddy go check them?
Well, I could, I guess, but I
But
don't
you
think
want to save the glory for yourself.
I wouldn't. If he went, I wouldn't care. But I just have a feeling he'll just go down there when I go down there. But if you want to go, I'm all for that, because I'd love to see what's there and probably get more pictures if we could, refresh the mineral stations and clear the cards and stuff.
How could you wait that long? I would go crazy.
Oh, I know. I'm gonna be sitting here itching, just dying. But the good thing is, last year it was sort of a similar situation. I was planning on going down more often. I just got busy. So we set the cameras in early May last year, and then we came back mid-August, and the batteries were still good in the cameras. They were still taking pictures, and we just had, as you know, just an amazing trail camera pull that day. So I'm hoping we'll come back for the same thing. And this property's got beans on it this year, so I'm going to try to get a night where I can just sit in the field and do some filming and hopefully see some big boys come out in the field at night and check the cameras. And otherwise, pretty much all the stands are ready to go. You know, we've kind of figured the farm out over the past 2 years to a decent degree. So
just those maintenance trips, then.
Exactly. Just some maintenance, some checking pictures and seeing who we see, and I'm excited. I got the couple bucks that I shot last year back yesterday from the taxidermist. So
I saw the pictures on Facebook.
Yeah, pretty cool seeing those guys come back to life to some degree, and get to think back on all those awesome memories. So I'm excited. I'm excited. Have you got to do any turkey hunting yet?
Okay. You know how me and you kind of have this. Well, at first we kind of disagreed about, going out and taking other hunters hunting. So I figured if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it during turkey hunting. All right.
Okay.
So I took my wife out, who's not a new hunter for turkey. So, and at the time she was 38 weeks pregnant. And I took her out. She got real close to a tom. He just didn't come in front of the blind. He was actually like 30 yards away, but to the side of us. And then my good friend, I've known him since 8th grade, and we're just, he was in my wedding, all that good stuff. I took him out. He bought a brand new shotgun, and we went turkey hunting around here where I live. I called in a tom 20, 30 yards from him, and he got into position. We weren't in a ground blind. We were just kind of walking through the woods, started strutting behind us in this field, and he really didn't know how to use a shotgun.
Oh, no.
And so he pulled the trigger and nothing happened. His action wasn't all the way forward.
Ugh.
And so the crazy part about it is he was actually able to take the bullet out, put a new one in, thinking it might have been a dud, put the action forward, but not all the way again. He pulled the trigger like 3 times and nothing happened. And finally, I'm just like, okay, you don't know how to use this gun. Don't kill yourself. So now I give him crap, and I call him, I just say, man, I got you in position. You are literally the worst hunter in the world if you can't kill. I give him some crap about that, but no, man, I got set up on a farm this year where the turkey were just very numerous, tons and tons of birds, and I gave up a lot of my time for other people, and then plus with my wife being pregnant, that limited my time. So I kind of, the season turkey hunting wise is a wash for me.
Well, at least you got some people out there.
Yeah, for sure.
I had a heck of a turkey season.
I know. I'm jealous.
I went 6 for 7. So when I say that, I went turkey hunting 7 times, of which twice I had a tag, and the other times I was just there helping a friend or my dad.
Yep.
And there were birds killed 6 out of the 7 times. So
Nice.
I killed a nice tom in Michigan on my first morning. Well, my second morning. I passed on 3 birds the first morning, killed my bird the second morning. Next morning, I got my buddy Josh a bird. That evening, I got my dad a bird. And then I went back out in Ohio. I killed my bird the first morning. Josh missed his. So that's my 7th that didn't happen. And then I went out this past weekend, took my buddy Corey along with another friend Andy. We went out there and called one in, and Corey got his. So had a lot of dead birds this year. It was a lot of fun, really fun. Just
Awesome.
The turkeys were cooperating, and I didn't screw up. So
Good. I mean, turkey hunting is awesome. I mean, it's loud, it's fast, and when it's good, it can be really fun. And it's something to do when we're not whitetail hunting, so it just kind of keeps us outside. And I don't know, I just love sitting in the pitch black dark, and as that sun comes up, just
yeah, hearing them fire off like that
Yeah.
just before daylight, that's the best. Just sitting there. I like turkey hunting more with like a friend or two than just by myself, because I love, like, I remember that morning when I was out there with my dad and Josh, and as soon as they started striking up, it's just like we turn and look at each other, and every time one gobbles and another and another and another, you just look at each other like start laughing. Like, this is so awesome. It's on. So it's good stuff. But now that's done, and really there's nothing but, I mean, we've gone through shed season, we've gone through turkey season. Now it's just the velvet rut. We got the summer antler growing, and then it's time to hunt again. So
man, it's time to start. It's actually time to start working.
Yeah.
You got food plots. I'm sure other people have food plots. Here coming up is when I start trimming out my tree stands, and literally before you know it, we're going to be leaving for Idaho for our mule deer hunt, and I got to be ready by then because when I come back, I have a couple weddings in September, and one actually in October. So I have to be ready to go by October 1st.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It's going to be a lot of work. I'm going to be gone June and July, so I can only do my work in August. And then, as you know, it'll be Idaho mule deer hunting, Idaho elk hunting, and then I'm actually going out for another elk hunting trip now later in September. And then I'll get home, and then it's right back to whitetails in Ohio and Michigan. And I might be coming into your home state this year too, buddy.
Just stay out of my area.
I'm going to try to get on your neighbors and try to kill the Mark Kenyon buck.
I can't wait till I see some jacked up wired to hunt truck sitting in the field right where I go like my best day.
Yeah.
I'd probably slash your tires.
Yeah, I wouldn't blame you. Well, on that note, on you slashing my tires, today we're talking about co-ops. QDM co-ops and the power and what you can do with a group of people managing deer together in some way. But I don't want to talk about it too much. I want to let our guest, who's really an expert on this, tell us more about what these are and how we can use them and how that can help our hunting. And that's Anna Mitterling. And she's got a pretty cool job here in Michigan where she's specifically working with co-ops. So I want to get her here on the show, Dan, to talk to us about that, talk about what she's doing, and talk about how all of us can maybe harness the power of QDM co-ops. So with that said, should we get her on the line?
Let's do it.
All right, here we go. All right, here with us on the line now is Anna Mitterling. Welcome to the show, Anna.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Glad to be here.
Yeah, we're thrilled to have you on the line and on the show. And I've been seeing your name pop up all over online and in different publications over the last few months. And I knew I wanted to get you on the show to talk about this topic because we haven't really talked about this at all, but it's an important thing, and that's co-ops. Specifically, given the fact that we're deer guys, whitetail quality deer management co-ops. So we're hoping to pick your brain all about this kind of thing. But before we do that, I want to maybe set some context here for why you're the person we want to talk to about this. And as I understand it, Anna, your official job title is Wildlife Cooperative Coordinator. So I guess first, is that correct? And then secondly, can you tell us what that means?
Yeah, that's correct. It's a unique position, by the way. I think there's only two in the country that I know of anyway. But yes, that's correct. And what I do, or what that position does, is it's kind of what the title is as far as coordinating cooperatives. But my job is kind of to be a point person or a middle person to connect cooperatives with resources that help them out and give them benefit. So whether it's bringing in DNR resources, whether it's personnel, information, money, or I don't know, there's so many different resources out there. So my job is to kind of go out and find out what different things there are that can be of benefit to cooperatives and then bring them forward to provide them.
Okay. So I think the most natural question then that I have next, and I know this given some of my own experiences, but maybe some of our listeners don't know what a cooperative is. And I think once we figure that out, there would be a ton of different questions me and Dan probably have, given a couple of things you said that, I'm already curious about what these different resources are you're talking about. But I guess for those that don't know, what is a co-op when it comes to deer, on the deer side of things? What is that? What are these groups that you're working with?
Yeah. So they're typically private landowners that come together to manage deer together. So individuals still maintain their personal, private land rights, but it's more bringing the conversation to orient around a larger quantity of properties and parcels than just 40 acres. So if you have 40 acres, you can't do a whole lot managing wildlife or especially deer on that amount of land. So if you can get some other landowners involved, it's pretty easy to get acreage numbers up to 2,000 for a shorter term. Early on, a lot of the co-ops that I work with are 7 to 10,000 acres, and you can obviously count and manage for a lot more at that scale than you can just by yourself.
Yeah, wow, that's incredible that you've been able to work with some that are that large. I was doing a little bit of research before jumping on the call here, and I saw that your position uniquely, or seems unique to me, is funded not only by what I believe is your main employer, MUCC, but also in partnership with the Michigan DNR, the Quality Deer Management Association, and Pheasants Forever. How does that work? Why are all these different organizations coming together to essentially make your position a reality? Or is that accurate?
Yeah, that's completely accurate. Those are awesome organizations that all have a very big role in my position. And that kind of, I guess the background on that is that wildlife, or specifically deer cooperatives, are something that came up in the deer management planning process that happened several years ago when the first draft came through. And so DNR saw a lot of interest in that and put together a research program. So I actually did the research in grad school on deer cooperatives and trying to understand why they're successful, what successful means, and kind of what are they doing. So what makes them, how are they organized, what are the different social aspects of it, what does their harvest look like, and all that kind of stuff. So DNR got really involved, really interested, very invested in co-ops in general. And as that research came out, and we were able to find things that indicated huge success, especially in areas where there's higher deer densities and reducing antlerless populations a little bit, and just working together as a group to accomplish goals. And cooperatives also have much higher satisfaction than non-cooperative hunters do. So those brought in DNR, and they put out to find some partners to get some additional funding. And the reason DNR was able to put this funding together is because of the license package that went through in Michigan. So they added a base license and increased license fees a little bit for deer. And I think pretty much everything else had a few dollar increase. Well, then QDMA became involved as a very natural aspect because deer cooperatives are primarily what most of the groups have here in Michigan. And then Pheasants Forever became involved because the DNR has a pheasant restoration initiative. And so along with that, there's, I guess, an aspect that looks at promoting pheasant cooperatives around the state to increase connected land and making better habitat for pheasants to come back and be more successful here. And then MUCC came along because MUCC is the perfect place to host something that has multiple different partners involved, and just the stakeholder presence that we have and the amount of individuals and clubs and all of the different things that MUCC represents made it a perfect place for me to actually be housed at and still represent different interests of the different partners.
Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something, because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
Wow. You got if I took anything, it sounds like you've got a lot of bosses.
They all do really well. MUCC is my boss, but we definitely do juggle interests that actually fit very naturally together in the other aspects. So it's pretty good gig, actually.
Yeah, it sounds pretty cool. It's something that's exciting to me to hear about. Being a Michigan resident, me and my friends and lots of different people I talk to, as a lot of us tend to sometimes we sometimes complain about the management of, the wildlife resources in our state. Occasionally, me and my friends will grumble about the deer situation and different things like that. And it's nice to see that it seems like the DNR and related organizations are actually listening to some of this feedback, that came out of that study you mentioned earlier, and are actually doing things like creating a position like this to address that to a degree, promoting the idea of co-ops and the benefits of that. Seems like a really great actionable item that the DNR is moving forward on to address the fact that people in Michigan want to see, a better quality deer herd in some cases. So I'm encouraged to see that.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
The other thing that I got to thinking about when you mentioned that you had done some research on this in graduate school is probably the coolest thing about you, which is that you went to Michigan State University, right?
I did. Go green.
Go white. I love it.
Go Hawks. Okay?
Come on, Dan. You're outnumbered out here. You're outnumbered. There's no chance. You got nothing here. I love seeing a fellow Spartan out there doing good work when it comes to deer. So that is cool. Can you tell us about what that research was that you did?
Yeah. So primarily it was a social networking and analysis, social capital research. So it was just looking at how individuals utilize natural resources, and the social capital being like how it infiltrates in their lives and how it's captured. I don't know if that made any sense. I'm a little bit more removed from graduate school now.
No, we follow.
Essentially, the two key things that I looked at was social networking and the influence of those individuals within the co-op on other people in the co-op. And the factor that we looked at was doe harvest and the number of does that were harvested. And we found that there were direct correlations between, say, you guys are my hunting buddies. I would be much more likely to harvest more does if the two of you had harvested more does the previous year. If you guys had shot less deer, I'd be more likely to hunt less deer. That would mean that you influence my behavior. There's also the inverse response where if you guys harvested, 3 does, I might freak out and only harvest 1 or maybe none because I thought you harvested too much. So we're able to measure and see that there was a distinct correlation between what the people that you hunt with harvest as far as doe harvest goes, and what you as an individual then determined you were going to do for your own behavior.
That's pretty fascinating.
So that was pretty neat.
So what did you end up finding? Was it that initial correlation, or was it the inverse where people kind of panic and back off on the harvest?
It depended. So pretty much we're just looking to see if there was influence. So there was influence both ways, and it studied 17 cooperatives in particular. Most of them were southern Michigan, so decreasing the population. This is all pre-EHD too.
Okay.
Decreasing the population was a pretty big deal and a major issue for concern and focus for DNR at that point. And so most of them, it was, the first part where more guys were harvesting more deer based on what their colleagues were doing. There were a couple groups that were opposite, but it just depended on the group. Essentially, there was influence, and that was what was interesting about it.
Yeah, very interesting. So I've done a pretty good amount of work when it comes to, understanding quality deer management and how co-ops work, but I don't know if Dan is as familiar. So Dan, given, what she mentioned a few minutes ago, the high overview of, what a co-op is, do you have any more questions for Anna just in regards to what a QDM co-op is or how it works, or do you have a clear understanding?
Yeah, I understand what it is, but I'm sure there's people out there who don't. So if you want to be, more specific and elaborate a little bit on what an actual QDMA co-op is.
Well, and maybe I can jump in a second. That's a question, I guess. I think something you just said there is a common maybe misconception. You said a QDMA co-op, Dan,
Yeah.
Okay.
And so that's the Quality Deer Management Association. That's an organization. And then there's just a philosophy of management, which is the Quality Deer Management, just philosophy or practices. So my question, Anna, for you is, can you have a co-op that's not affiliated with a QDMA?
Yes. In fact, most are not directly affiliated with QDMA. I would say that almost all of them directly disseminate information from QDMA, but the only reason that they kind of dissociate the name a little bit is just simply because of misperceptions there are about what QDMA stands for and what they're about. But I think QDMA is an awesome organization, regardless of whether I'm getting some of my paychecks from them or not. But there's a lot of people that don't understand, the true heart and breadth, I guess, of what QDMA represents. So there's a very different, a big difference between QDM and QDMA. And I spent a lot of time talking that over with my advisor in grad school, explaining, there's a big difference. There's quality deer management, which is simply quality deer management, and that is separate from QDMA. So
can you then pretend like we're your professor here that you're having this discussion with? Can you explain to us then, from your perspective, and for these co-ops that you're working with, how do they view quality deer management, or how do they define quality deer management? All right, now, before we get to that, I'd like to pause briefly to thank our partners at Sitka Gear for their support of the Wired to Hunt podcast. And starting next week on each episode, we're going to be featuring a series of really short Q&As with some employees from Sitka Gear about different types of gear advice, frequently asked questions about Sitka, and a whole lot more, so keep an eye out for that. But in the meantime, I want to give you a heads up on a pretty awesome giveaway that Sitka is running this month, and that continues the rest of May 2015. Every day till the end of this month, Sitka is giving away prototypes of their brand new whitetail line of gear. And here's how it works. Each day a new item or items is going to be given away, but they don't tell you what the actual item is for grabs that day. You just need to enter every day, and then the next day they announce whoever won and what they won. So it's kind of a blind giveaway, but it's cool because they're giving away an absolute ton of things. I mean, something new or multiple items every single day. Now, what's cool is that while the average guy and girl doesn't know what's being given away, I actually have a little insider knowledge into what's going to be up for grabs on these final days of the month, and I'm going to let you guys in on it. So here's a couple hints. If you're listening today, May 21st, 2015, make sure to enter today, because they're going to be giving away a brand new Fanatic Light jacket, and that thing is awesome. I've been wearing the Fanatic jacket, and this is a slightly lighter version of that I think is going to be really cool. So be sure to sign up today for that. And then if you're the type who likes to make a fashion statement and who's willing to try some new things, make sure you enter on May 27th, because they'll be giving away 2 shackets. Yes, it's a shacket. That's a t-shirt jacket. It's insulated like a jacket, but fit like a t-shirt. And what it does is it keeps you warmer than a vest, as it covers your inner arms, with a half sleeve there, where a lot of heat's usually lost, but it keeps the mobility that you'd have with a vest because you don't have that lower sleeve. I've actually been wearing it this year so far. I did some early turkey hunts with it, and it's really cool. So make sure you go to facebook.com/sickgear to enter that giveaway. Make sure you go to facebook.com/sickgear, where you're going to see a post every single day with a link to sign up for that day's giveaway. So check it out. You've got till the end of May to sign up for each day. And if you get some of that stuff, I know you're going to love it, because the new whitetail gear launching in June is very cool. Now, back to the show.
Yeah, well, essentially, it's how QDMA does it. It's just taking the A out. But it's really looking at having an overall herd quality. So having good habitat, having responsible harvest, having a more balanced age structure, more balanced sex ratio, and being able to see some more mature deer on the properties.
Okay, so those sound like good things. Like, those are things I want where I hunt. Those are things that Dan wants where he hunts. I guess my next question then is, let's say I'm a hunter sitting here at home, and I am, and I'm wondering 2 things. This all sounds great and dandy. I'm wondering, first, do they work? Is this something that's worth my time getting involved in? And then the next thing I'm going to wonder is, how do I get involved in one? So either how do I find one or how do I start one? But I'm thinking I want to start here at the beginning. if I'm a skeptic, do quality deer management co-ops, do deer co-ops work, Anna?
Yeah. Well, it depends on who you talk to. I mean, everyone's going to have different expectations and different experiences. From what my research shows, yes, they absolutely work. There are very big differences between harvests. So, for example, in Michigan, again, a lot of times we have high deer density, so we need to harvest does to manage that. And the buck-to-doe harvest ratios among co-ops was 1 to 2, compared to just the general Michigan deer harvest survey, it's about 1 to 1. So yes, there's a difference there. Better management in an area where we need to reduce deer populations. Yes, it works there. The other measure that I look to answer that question with is satisfaction. Satisfaction is the number one indication of recruitment and retention. And we need to have satisfied hunters if we're going to have them continue hunting and if they're going to bring their other buddies on board to join them in hunting. And in Michigan, southern Michigan, the deer harvest report again shows about a 46% satisfaction. But within my co-ops, I found about a 74% satisfaction. Around there somewhere. It was a lot higher.
Yeah.
So, yes, they work. It does take time to see differences as far as what the harvest looks like. I tell guys it typically takes 4 to 6 years before you start seeing more mature deer out there once you start passing on the younger ones as a collective group. And then once you get to 7 to 10 years, you have to start getting a little bit more creative on how you maintain interactions with your co-op members. So a lot of co-ops will have pre- and post-season meetings, or they'll have habitat days or just different activities throughout the year to keep people engaged. And you have to kind of step the game up a little bit after a while to keep it from just drying up and disseminating.
Yeah. So what about the thing that a lot of guys initially probably turn to co-ops for? Like, if we're being honest about the situation, lots of hunters are wanting to see more mature deer and more large deer, right? We want to see big mature bucks. Most hunters, that's something that gets them pretty excited about.
Mm-hmm.
Can co-ops help with that?
Yes. So if you think about it, a lot of times the reasons why people will say that they don't see big bucks is because everyone's shooting them young, and no one wants to wait for, you don't want to wait and let a buck pass if your neighbor's going to shoot them. And that's a very common perception that we have. I think a lot of times as hunters that if we don't harvest it, our neighbor's going to. And one of the benefits of co-ops is, if nothing else, it increases the conversation. And a lot of times guys find out that, the neighbor was shooting them because they thought you were going to shoot them, and you were shooting them because you thought your neighbor was going to shoot them. And now that you've both talked to each other, neither of you are going to shoot them. And you're going to let them mature to that next year. And so having a co-op and having that conversation and that communication open makes a big difference initially right there, just because the communication's open.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've even seen that personally where I hunt here in Michigan. I've been able to talk to some of my neighbors and we don't have an official co-op, but just by talking to each other about, what our goals are and the possibilities, we've been able to see that, talk to them, hey, I'm going to hold out for bucks of 3 years or older. And if you do that too, and so-and-so is doing it too, there's a pretty good chance that these deer are going to make it to that age. And I've gotten a handful of different people to jump on board with that because of it. And, to a degree, we've been seeing some success with that. So there's definitely, I personally think, you've obviously seen it at a larger scale, but I've seen it at a personal scale that there's definitely the possibility to see that work. So, Dan, I see you've been taking some interesting notes here, though, on our little note page. What are you thinking here? What kind of questions do you have for Anna next?
So the first question that pops into my head is, guys like me and Mark are all about deer management, but we may not hunt in an area that has deer management. All right. So if I owned a piece of property and I wanted to talk to the neighbor who may be, I'll just use my scenario for an example. We have party hunters who will drive deer into a pinch point and shoot everything that kind of walks by. How do I explain to those guys that maybe they shouldn't kill so many does, or they need to let the young deer pass? How do I approach someone who doesn't currently practice management?
Yeah. Well, are you already, do you have a relationship with them already?
The relationship.
You've interacted with them.
The relationship is I do know their name, and the only relationship I really have with them is, hey, what'd you shoot last year?
Okay.
Sounds like a budding
That-
friendship.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a tough situation, and that's honestly, I don't have much of an answer other than, maybe having a barbecue or something at the property you hunt at and invite them to come over and just talk philosophy about hunting. I don't know. But what makes a cooperative a little bit different as far as neighbors is you build a relationship. And one of the things, and I don't know if this helps answer your question a little bit, but guys will call me up and they own land somewhere other than where they live, and they want to start a cooperative at that property that they purchased in the recent past. I recommend that they find someone that was, is a local guy that's been there for 20 plus years and is part of that local community, to have them start up conversations. So you get someone else that's local to buy into the concept and philosophy of what you want to accomplish, and have them be the face of it. Just because a lot of guys have a hard time having someone come from the outside in and tell them what to do, which is a lot of times how that conversation can be interpreted. So I guess my suggestion to you would then be to find someone that relates more to what, better management maybe, that can have a conversation with you and those people rather than just you going in.
Right. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I know these people. I mean, I grew up in the area. I just left, but I still hunt there. So I know these
Yeah.
people. I guess my question is, I don't gun hunt. I'm only a bow hunter. I have very high standards. I try to take one doe a year, and I try to take a mature buck. All right. Those are, I kind of take it upon myself to harvest both sexes, but it's almost like there's a difference between my way of hunting and tradition. And I just
Right.
feel that tradition is kind of hard to break. Is there maybe a tip that you could provide me when I do go to approach them, say, hey, in a nicer way, lay off the mass murder?
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
I've got a thought, something that's worked for me, and maybe you've got something totally different on your mind, Anna. But when it comes to that type of deal, the way I found, at least to start these conversations, is I think, like you mentioned, and the most important thing is finding a way to start that relationship, and that's where this has to start. Because, like you mentioned, if you're an outsider coming in who all of a sudden, knock on the neighbor's door and say, hey, you're shooting too many deer, or you're shooting the wrong deer, or I don't like how you're doing it, that's not going to work very well. So, what I've always thought the best way to go about it is to just first focus on developing that relationship. Just a basic, hey, I hunt, you hunt, nice to meet you, great to get to know you, talk about it, just develop those like seeds of relationship. And then the next step for me has always been trail camera pictures. Because that's something that people get excited about, regardless of if they practice QDM or not. People love seeing pictures of bucks. So I like to show them, hey, I've been getting some pretty good bucks on camera here. I've been, seeing some pretty good deer here, and show them some pictures. And sometimes you'll have a guy who's like, oh man, I know that buck, or oh, I've seen some good ones too, and they'll pull out their phone and we'll start looking at pictures together. And so there's a connection, right? Now we're seeing some good deer and we're talking about it, and through that, now I can start to through that conversation starter, now I can start to gauge whether or not they do care about older age class deer, or if they have any standards when it comes to what they're shooting, or if they're even aware of these different kinds of things. So then I can kind of gauge where they stand on things just through that part of the conversation. And then let's say maybe they haven't been managing to any degree. They've just been shooting whatever they see. But now, at least what I found is by showing them, hey, here's a good buck, I'm waiting until he gets to next year. Or these are some bucks that I've been passing and now they've gotten to this age class. They start saying, wow, there are some big deer around here. So for the guys maybe that are more the traditionalists, Dan, maybe that just go out there and gun hunt every once in a while, and maybe they don't run cameras and they don't really pay attention to that stuff. I think in some cases, if you show them that, hey, hey, look at the potential. Like, there are some deer like this, but if we wanted to hunt more older, bigger deer like this, the way I found to do that is to pass on the young ones, and those conversations can sometimes start. And so I've done a bunch of that trail camera bouncing around with friends or with neighbors, talking about this picture, sharing pictures. And over the past, 3-4 years that I've been hunting one of these properties, more and more they're getting interested in it, and they're asking me some questions about, how I'm seeing these deer, or how we're getting these deer to hang out on our property. And I think that's, the seeds to getting those co-op or those QDM conversations started. So I don't know. That's what's worked for me. I don't know. Have you seen anything different, Anna, or have anything to add to that?
Now, a lot of you guys are familiar with the old hunting tradition of eating, some organ, the heart or a chunk of liver off the first animal you kill. I had that when I was a little kid, and it was a big deal. Organ meats were always prized by frontier people who knew the importance of getting a lot of different minerals and nutrients. And as often is the case, those guys were onto something, because organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. And you can get the same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil, made exclusively from regeneratively raised, grass-fed, and finished cattle. Heart and Soil's unique freeze-drying process means all those important nutrients are trapped in, ensuring you experience every one of the benefits of nature's superfood in a clean, convenient, taste-free capsule. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And make sure to use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase. That's heartandsoil.co. Use the code MeatEater. There's nothing like snook hook sets at dawn or catching a tarpon in the moonlight. Find your next fishing trip made easy on fishingbooker.com and experience the magic of the Sunshine State or any other destination on your fishing bucket list. Book a blue water adventure in search of sailfish or go snapper fishing with the kids. With over 6,000 captains and trips to choose from, planning your next one just got a whole lot easier. Download the Fishing Booker app on the Google Play or App Store, or visit them online at fishingbooker.com to book your trip today.
No, I think that's great. I do have some additions. I fully 100% agree with that's an awesome way to build in a relationship and conversation. The other part that I think you alluded to a little bit too is just by continuing to lead by example. And so, sharing your hunting story and maybe talking about what you passed and that stuff as well. Another thing, and Quality Whitetails that just came out, they had a really good article, and it was talking about that neighbor. Everyone has that neighbor. And one of the things that they recommended was if someone harvests a buck that maybe you would have passed on, but you have trail camera pictures on and maybe from previous years as well, taking those pictures that you've accumulated over whatever period of time and giving them to the person that harvested that deer. So it not only honors the deer, but it also, honors the hunter, but it also shows that this is someone you've been watching for a period of time that you have value for, and it's something that you thought about. It wasn't just something that you would have pulled the trigger on without thinking through and knowing what you've known about this animal you've been watching for however long.
I like that.
The other thing is that you never know how things are going to change down the road. So even if you're not on the same page, just always being positive about where you're at and being okay with where they are, because you want them to be able to come to you later if they decide that they're going to start shifting their behavior and their thought process. And if you create a situation in any way that kind of makes you seem like a jerk and someone that thinks what they're doing is totally unacceptable, when A, it's probably, as long as it's legal, and B, they're satisfied with it, there's not really much you can do or say anyway. So you don't want to turn them off because of something that you said, or you put them down in some way because of decisions and actions they're making that they justify as fine.
Yeah.
So how does let's say we're in the starting phase of this co-op. All right. I've talked with my neighbor. I've talked with a couple neighbors in the area, and we agree, okay, let's give this thing a try. That first year, my neighbor shoots a buck that is less than what we've kind of agreed upon as a standard. We're not going to shoot any two-year-olds. We're going to try to hold out for 3-year-olds or 4-year-olds, whatever they decide, or maybe they take a couple more does than what was agreed upon. Is there a way to police it without kind of sounding like a dictator?
You don't want to. I mean, especially unless they're hunting on your property. If it's their property, you don't want to punish it. You don't want to make them the outcast.
Right.
So instead you put the peer pressure on by exemplifying the people that did things well. And you can't, it's a struggle to do that until a couple years because you need to give deer a couple years to grow, you know? But you don't ever want to exile anyone or make them feel like what they did was horrible or degrade them. It's more just kind of, oh, nice animal, and move on, and just not dwelling on it and really focusing on the awesome things that happened.
Is there a positive way to do that, though? I mean, to say, hey, I thought we had a discussion that we were going to do this or that, without sounding like a Debbie Downer.
You can ask them. I wouldn't do it in a group setting.
Yeah.
So just one-on-one.
That's a good point.
Hey, I noticed this. I just wondered it didn't fit with what we had agreed to. Were there some extenuating circumstances? You can definitely do that. But until it becomes a repeat offense, I probably wouldn't worry about it too much, especially in the first couple of years.
I think that this topic right here, the idea of what happens when the other guy shoots a deer that I wish that they hadn't shot, I think this is like the overarching problem that has led to the misconceptions that we mentioned at the very beginning of this, that people have about the QDMA and QDM in general. I think you hear a lot of people talking on TV. I practice. That we practice QDM, but what they're doing really isn't the four main concepts or core concepts of quality deer management. They just shoot big deer, or they just try to shoot a 150 or whatever it might be. Or what you end up getting is these guys that are trying to shoot a big deer, and then they talk down to people that don't, or they talk down to people that aren't following the same standards that they have, or they talk down to people that have different ideas of what constitutes a good deer hunt. And I think it's that negativity, when someone becomes, being a jerk to another guy because they shot a fork horn or whatever, that is what has given the idea of quality deer management a bad name in some people's eyes, because they feel like, because of a few bad apples, I think quality deer management as an umbrella concept gets this black eye as being a bunch of jerks who, try to tell everyone what they can shoot and what they can't shoot and only like big deer, and they hate on anyone who doesn't shoot big deer. And I think that's a huge misconception, because that's not what 99% of the people who practice real quality deer management are doing. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Perfect. So then I think that, to what you're asking, Dan, I think that's super important, is like how you deal with that. And I really liked your idea, Anna, of not focusing on the negative, and instead of focusing on that, still having a conversation about it maybe, but really then just, positive reinforcement to the people that are doing a great job, and just kind of not give the positive reinforcement to those who maybe aren't. But I think another thing is just continuing to focus on the education part of it. Because I think that's where, at least from what I've seen and from what I've heard, I think that's where these co-ops can really be powerful, is if you can get someone in the door who's, just kind of on the fence about it, but they're intrigued enough and they like you enough, or they like your idea enough to kind of give it a shot. If you can just get them in the door and then provide that continuing education and talking about why we're doing what we're doing and what are the results of what we've all been doing, as they see that, I think you're going to find more and more people, starting to really buy into it full, whole hog. And more people, maybe that first year, they end up shooting a really nice 2-year-old because, heck, I've never shot a deer that big. And if you were to knock him down and say, hey, you didn't follow our rules, screw you, he's out, he would have been negative, had that negative interaction and gotten out of there. But if instead you, like you said, had that more positive interaction with him, and then next year he learns a little bit more about why we're doing this, and he's like, yeah, you know what, maybe I should have passed on that 2-year-old, because he could have been a 3 or 4-year-old and reached his full potential, and then he would have been like that deer that Dan shot next door, which was a 5.5-year-old 160-inch 200-pound buck. That could have been what happened. So I think if you don't ruin it for them early on, you just open up the opportunities for them to see it really come to fruition down the road.
Yeah. And you have to remember, too, for a co-op to be successful, there has to be trust. So you have to trust that neighbors are actually going to pass like they say they're going to pass. And so it makes sense that it's going to take a couple years for that trust to start to develop, and being able to resist the fear that if you don't shoot it, your neighbor's going to. And so you have to attribute some of it to those kind of, thought processes as well, and not look at people so much as a rule breaker, but more just someone that doesn't trust their neighbors yet. and be a little bit accommodating and understanding that, it's going to take some time for this to happen on multiple levels.
Yeah. So I want to take a quick step backwards, though, here, because I think we've talked a lot about, the benefits of a co-op and how maybe to manage some of those interactions within a co-op. But what if I'm still at that stage where I'm not a member of a co-op yet, but I want to be? What should someone do if they want to find a current co-op or if they want to start one themselves? How do you start that?
Yeah. Well, if you're in Michigan, I have a co-op map that you can look at all the co-ops that I'm aware of in Michigan, and there's over 80. So I don't know if I'm sure you could put the link or something on your website, but there's a link, there's a map, there's a way to do that in Michigan. If you're not in Michigan, or another way you could do that is contact a local QDM branch. A lot of times they're aware of the co-ops that are in the area. Another option would be to talk to like a regional biologist that works for the local agency. A lot of times they're involved with cooperatives as well.
And then what about if you want to start one yourself?
So if you want to start one, and again, if you live in Michigan or even Missouri, for example, they also have a wildlife co-op coordinator. You can contact your co-op coordinator and find out, what kind of resources and next steps there are. One of the first things I recommend doing, though, is talking to a couple of your neighbors and making sure that you have interest, because you want to have a solid core group of people to start out with and to have the support of. And I had alluded before, if you're not a local guy, get someone that's local to join on and, pick up the build of a co-op with you. So that would be your first couple steps there. And then what you'll want to do is start strategizing what your personal goals for the co-op are. So if it's seeing more mature deer, maybe it's, just having a better understanding on what the population looks like on a landscape level. Maybe it's getting people together to help create better habitat. Typically it's just to let deer get to that next age class, but whatever it is, understand what your own personal goals would be for that cooperative, and then start talking to those other landowners that you've started connecting with and find out what some of their goals are as well. You want things that are measurable, achievable, obtainable, and ways that you can look for indications that you're taking steps in that direction as time continues on in the future. Those are the key initial start off there. But you also want to have a meeting early on where you just invite other landowners in the area to come to and talk kind of about, so you want to start a co-op. These are some of the things that we have in mind, but we want to hear from you guys as well. This would be our cooperative that we're in on together, and it's kicking off, and you're part of that process.
Okay. That seems to kind of fall in line with my assumption. That makes a lot of sense. So, Dan, you're over there, your brain's churning. What are you wondering next in this process?
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily next, but in regards to starting a co-op, and maybe you can go back to the research you did in Southern Michigan. What kind of roadblocks did you see when someone like myself or Mark wanted to start a co-op with somebody? What were what were the excuses that others used or reasons that they didn't want to join?
Honestly, the biggest roadblock, and I feel like I'm going to say this a lot, but the biggest roadblock has been someone that's not a local guy trying to start the co-op by himself.
Gotcha.
That's the biggest roadblock. The other one is highly opinionated people. But they were able to reconcile and bring that back and, drop their tone a little bit and get some more, friendly, smiley faces to come along until they learned how to mediate their goals a little bit better. Because, like you said, it's really easy to be really abstinent that this is what the goal was, this is what we agreed to, why aren't you sticking to it? So you need to have some people, if that's your personality temperament type, it's important to have someone that's a little bit more friendly and lackadaisical to go along with the ride and keep people happy and excited about what you're trying to do.
Yeah. What about kids? When I talk, we hear a lot of people talking about quality deer management, and for a property or for a co-op, lots of times we'll set some type, there'll be some type of standard. We're going to try to harvest the appropriate number of does for the habitat and for the population, and we're going to hold out for 3.5-year-old bucks or 4.5-year-old bucks or something like that. But then you get the wild card of what about if there's a child who hasn't killed a deer yet? Or what if there is a new hunter How do you recommend handling that? Should they be able to shoot whatever they want, or how have you seen that handled?
Almost all co-ops will say, if it's your first year, any first year is a trophy. It's a big deal. So most of them will put aside their guidelines for youth, first-time hunters, and for seniors.
Okay, I like it. Then I guess where my mind leads me next, and we've talked about how to start a co-op. We've talked about how to handle some of the different roadblocks you might have, some of the different challenges. Is there any, or maybe from your experience, right? You've been doing this now, working with co-ops here in Michigan. Are there any examples you've seen, personally, of the power of a co-op? I mean, we've talked about, sure, there's tangible benefits where we've seen increased satisfaction, but can you share with us a story? Do you have any stories that come to mind of a specific instance of a co-op where they've seen this, transform their hunting or their satisfaction? Have you actually had any, personal stories like that have come to life yet?
Well, so I think my research in general shows on the satisfaction increase. And I've had tons and tons of conversations. Every single co-op that I studied, I had at least most of them were about a 2-hour-long interview with every co-op leadership. So whoever the leaders were of that co-op, I sat down and talked to them for a long time. And even now, we had some co-op workshops around the state where we had some co-op leaders come and share about the challenges and successes of their co-ops. And time and time again, you hear about the relationship. So I think my favorite story I've been telling so far is one of the co-op leaders started his co-op and had that neighbor that he didn't like. They didn't get along. They were definitely not friends. And because of the co-op starting, they started talking and getting to actually know each other, putting their differences aside a little bit. And now they're really good friends. They hunt out of state together. So you go from being neighbors that can't even talk to each other because they just don't like each other to now they put the investment in hunting out of state together. And that's just one example I think that really models the potential for relational development and conversation and communication that can take place to just change the dynamics of a relationship.
Yeah. That's pretty cool. It's funny, as you mentioned that, it makes me think of a story that we had one of our other podcast guests a couple weeks ago, Jim Brauker, had mentioned in his situation where he was hunting, he started talking to his neighbor, and Jim was the guy who was shooting every deer that went on their property, and his neighbor got really depressed because he knew that Jim and the other people that hunted this property would shoot everything, and he would never be able to get any bucks to get older. And so he actually thought about moving because of that, but he ended up, just like you said, they ended up developing a relationship, and this guy helped educate Jim about the powers of, of what you can do through managing deer. And now look at, Jim Brauker now is a super serious whitetail hunter, manager, habitat savant. And, if it hadn't been for someone being willing to start that relationship and being open to it, even though this guy was shooting deer he wasn't happy about, look at where it's taken them now. So it's cool to see that.
Yeah, well, and even beyond that, he came to one of my workshops and presented and talked about his co-op experience. And he had, I would say, almost like a spiritual shift in a sense, because he had, jumped onto the whole quality deer management thing. He had been part of a co-op for a really long time, one of the leaders of it. He was a fan of co-ops, but something happened last fall that completely changed his belief and full understanding on what a co-op means and the sacrifice that it entails. So him and two other guys in their co-op, they're all, they have fairly small acreage, so we're just talking, I think they all have 40 to 70 acres apiece, so not much property there. And all three of them got a huge buck on the same day in the same area. And he had this big realization that in order for your neighbor, in order for there to be true benefit to the co-op, there has to be pretty significant sacrifice by individuals. And they started realizing that when they harvested these animals, it was a joint effort. So it wasn't just his harvest, it was a co-op harvest. And I'm trying to look at my notes here to find exactly what he said, because it was a huge shift for him. But the best way to grow trust is to allow your neighbor to take the 10-point instead of yourself, is kind of where he was getting at. And that's a big deal in Michigan, to pass up on a 10-point. You don't see that very often. But in order for the success of the co-op and to be able to see more mature deer, that means that sometimes you as a co-op leader or a co-op member have to be willing to pass up on this significant harvest so that your neighbor will take him and buy into the idea that we can really have an amazing deer herd on our properties if we just take the time to pass up and we're patient and we wait to see what comes by.
Yeah, and that's pretty cool. It's cool to see people working as a larger group to improve the situation as a whole. And like you said, sometimes that takes some sacrifice. And lots of times, me and Dan talk about this all the time, whether it be in regards to deer politics or deer management or whatever it might be. Sometimes you have to sacrifice to see the greater good, and I think that's a perfect example of it. So it's cool to see what Jim and Jake, and I think I can't remember what their other friend's name was, but they had some awesome success last year in that area, and I'm sure there's lots of other co-ops in Michigan and all across the country where they're seeing similar results. So I don't know. I feel like we've got a hard stop coming up, so I've got a pretty solid idea now of what's going on with co-ops and how we can become involved in them. But Dan, do you have any final questions for Anna before we wrap this up?
No, not really. I'm glad we actually talked about this topic because I think it's the main point is you have to sacrifice if you want something to improve. You may have to eat a tag some year or, let your neighbor be successful multiple years in a row to allow you to get where you need to be. And I think that's something that a lot of people just aren't willing to do. And that might be one of the biggest roadblocks. So.
Yeah, I guess I got one final question for you, Anna. Given, what Dan's mentioned here about some of his neighbors, I know you are the co-op coordinator for Michigan, but can we get you on a kind of side project to just work on a co-op in Iowa with Dan to help him out over there?
I am willing to have conversations with anybody. I mean, I've talked to people in several other states that want to start something up, so if you want me to fly out, you're going to have to pay for my ticket. But I am more than willing to have conversations with anybody. I mean, hopefully this doesn't get too crazy, but I'm here as a resource. I mean, I think I fully believe in co-ops, and I think that there's a shift in what hunting is going to look like, and I think co-ops are part of that shift. So I'm a big fan, big proponent. I'm willing to have conversations with people about it and answer questions.
I think that's awesome, and I look out for a phone call from Dan. You never know what you might get from him. But
we'll just put your flight. Yeah, we'll put your flight on the Wired to Hunt tab, and we'll be good to go.
Okay, good. I'm in.
That credit card payment might get declined, I worry, but there's not a whole lot in that budget. But this has been awesome, and I'm glad we were able to have this conversation. And like you said, I think it's something that is going to be a big shift or part of the larger shift in deer hunting is more and more people want to achieve these kinds of goals, but they find that they can't do it by themselves on their back 20 or 40. So there's that need to start working with your neighbors, and I think it's a great thing. So I'm really fortunate. I'm really encouraged by the fact that, there's a role and there's a person like you doing this in Michigan, and I hope this is something that pops up in other states too. My final question for you then, Anna, is for people out there that are interested in this, maybe both in Michigan and then maybe just outside Michigan, are there any recommended resources? Where can someone go online to get more information about what you're doing or just about co-ops in general?
Yeah, well, one good place is we have deermichigan.com, and I have a blog, and I post a lot of stuff on there pertaining to co-ops. The other resource, and again, I am not saying this just because they pay part of my tab, but QDMA has hands down phenomenal resources for co-ops. They have a Developing Successful QDM Cooperatives book that is just full of really great ideas and insights. Quality Whitetails has more and more articles every issue on cooperatives. There are at least 2 just this last issue. So between those 2 spots, and then mucc.org has my full blog that has tips and ideas and talks about my adventures around the state and what other co-ops are doing as well.
Very cool. Well, we'll link to all that stuff in the show notes for this blog, which would be at wiredtohunt.com/episode 56, I think. So we'll link to all that stuff. And Anna, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. This is fun.
Absolutely. Well, good luck with the rest of your work this spring and summer, and hopefully you'll be able to get out and do some hunting this fall too, and we'll hear about those stories.
Sounds good.
All right. Have a good one, Anna.
You too.
Bye-bye. All right, well, that is going to be it for us today. And as always, we'd like to thank our partners who help make the Wired to Hunt podcast possible. So big thank you to Sitka Gear, Trophy Ridge, Bear Archery, Redneck Blinds, Huntera Maps, Ozonics, Carbon Express, Lacrosse Boots, and the Whitetail Institute of North America. And just a few more things before we wrap things up. If you've been enjoying the podcast, as we always ask, it would be incredible if you could leave us a rating or review on iTunes. Thank you in advance if you do that. And also, if you're not subscribed to the podcast yet on your mobile device, I'd highly recommend you do that. It's a lot easier than listening on the website. So if you use an Android device, I'd recommend downloading the Stitcher app. That's Stitcher, Stitcher. And if you use an Apple device, just use the podcast app. Those things will make it a lot easier. You'll get the episode downloaded automatically to your phone, and you won't need to go to the website and listen to it and then have issues there. So check that out. And then finally, thank you for joining us today. If you're looking to improve the deer herds and hunting in your area, I hope this episode helped bring some new ideas to mind for you. And with all that said, have a great week. Go enjoy that spring sunshine and stay wired to hunt.
I'm sure a lot of you guys remember the old ceremonial hunting tradition of eating the heart out of the first animal you kill. Meat from those organs are among the most nutrient-rich foods on the planet. You can get those same benefits your ancestors craved via convenient daily capsules from Heart and Soil. Find out more at heartandsoil.co. And remember, use code MeatEater for 10% off your purchase.
Outdoor adventure won't wait for engine problems. Things like hard starts, rough performance, and lost fuel economy are often caused by fuel gum and varnish buildup. Seafoam can help your engine run better and last longer. You simply pour a can into your gas tank. Hunters and anglers rely on Seafoam to keep their engines running the way it should the entire season. So pick up a can of Seafoam today at your local auto parts store or visit seafoamworks.com to learn more.